because of the way most Christians have been taught to think about demons, there's angels, there's demons, and then there's God, and that's pretty much the spiritual world. It creates some confusion when you listen to some of the things I've been saying. You actually have a number of different groups of rebels. In the beginning, you had intelligent beings that he has created that live in the spiritual world, and then there's human beings, okay? Intelligent beings that live in the terrestrial world. That's fine until, we actually get, some interaction. In Genesis 3, we have an initial rebellion. Okay, so we have the Satan figure. Okay, that's one rebel. Genesis 6, we have another group. That group, again, by all either Mesopotamian or biblical or Jewish tradition, the guilty parties there wind up being sent into the abyss until the time of the end. It's an eschatological judgment. So that's a second group. A third group we get from the Babel incident, Deuteronomy 32, 8, and 9, when God divides up the nations and assigns them to other sons of God, and then they become corrupt. God abandons the nations at Babel, and he says, Israel's going to be my portion now. Jacob is going to be my inheritance. And so he calls Abraham, and he makes for himself a new nation, Israel. This is why in the rest of the Old Testament it's Yahweh against the gods of the nations and Israel against those nations. The sons of God that are assigned to the other nations, this is the Old Testament explanation for why those nations got their own pantheons. We read in Psalm 82 that they have become corrupt. At some point in their history, they fail. They don't rule the nations the way God wants them ruled. Now those guys aren't bound. They're not in prison. The Genesis 6 ones are. What about demons? Just using that word demon. If you asked a first century Jew, hey, where do demons come from? They would have an immediate answer. If you ask a Christian now, they would say, I don't know because the Bible doesn't tell me. It's actually not the case. A Jew would say, well, sure, we know where demons come from. They're the disembodied spirits of dead Nephilim. And that sounds very bizarre to our ear. That's not what you hear in church. It's not what you hear in seminary either. But there are hints of it in the Old Testament. Isaiah 14, Isaiah 26, Job 26, verse 5. These are three passages that have Rephaim in the realm of the dead, what we think of as hell. Now, that tells you, again, where a Jew would have gotten this idea. So since they were part supernatural being and part earthly being, when you killed one, and this was an act of rebellion, again, their creation in the first place, their soul, as it were, which is not a human soul, again, in biblical thinking, it goes to hell. This is where they're punished. They incur the punishment that their fathers incurred, that gets sent to the pit. In Peter and Jude, 2 Peter 2 and Jude, it specifically says that the angels that sinned are in chains of gloomy darkness. They're imprisoned in the abyss. There is no other sin in the Old Testament, angels plural, that you can point to answer the question, what are Peter and Jude talking about? There is no other possibility other than Genesis 6. A lot of people think, well, there was this great cataclysmic rebellion before creation, and Satan used to control the earth, and then he rebelled, and then he became bad, and then he went to the Garden of Eden and all. This whole idea about a satanic rebellion before Adam and Eve, you will never find that in any verse in the Bible. But that's part of Christian tradition that's been passed down. I personally think it comes from Milton's Paradise Lost, a great Puritan book. But you will not find it in a single passage in the Bible. The closest you get is Revelation 12, Michael, a third of the angels, okay? But if you read Revelation 12, that story is in conjunction with the first coming of the Messiah, not the Garden of Eden, not something before Eden. So there's no other thing you can look at in the Bible to explain what Peter and Jude are talking about as far as angels that sin winding up in hell. And this is really part of our fallen angel tradition in Christianity, but it has some of these extraneous elements kind of thrown into it. In hell passages, if you want to use that term, in the Old Testament. Isaiah 14, Isaiah 26, Ezekiel 32, Job 26. You have Rephaim, which is a term used for the giants that descend from the Nephilim, in hell. When you killed one, their spirits were then natural inhabitants of hell. But they're never said to be bound. In fact, Jewish texts, and again, you get hints of this in the Bible too, perhaps seeking to possess bodies, demonic possession. I've described 4 different rebellions, or 4 different groups, 4 different bad guys. Satan, the ones in Genesis 6, then the departed spirits of their progeny, who are the demons, and then you've got the principalities and powers.